Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that comes pretty highly requested and a topic that I really like presenting on. So I'm going to take the lead today and talk about the self-funding objection. So I'm sure if you work in long-term care enough, you have heard this objection more than a few times. And I know the frustration it can cause. But the self-funding objection, just for those of you who may be brand new to working in the long-term care industry, the self-funding objection comes when somebody either tells you directly that they believe or tells you that they've been told by maybe a trusted advisor that they have enough assets to self-fund their long-term care. And like I mentioned, this can be a pretty frustrating objection to be confronted with because oftentimes this is somebody who you're introduced to who, um, by the looks of it, seems to be a very nice case. The good long-term care need, has the assets or income to be able to more than afford a long-term care plan, just seems like, um, a really good case that's in front of you, but oftentimes there are hurdles to overcome when you receive that objection. Most of the time, if I'm asking somebody, hey, are there any struggles that you have, or people even volunteer it to me quite often, I have issues with this objection. I have somebody who has an advisor that they trust implicitly. They've got undeniable wealth. Their advisor has told them, hey, you could probably just self-fund any extended care event and be okay. And so in my career before Buddy INS, I worked with a brokerage that worked with all of the major broker dealers. So Waddell and Reed, Raymond James, M&T Bank, a lot of higher end broker dealers were our clients. So I was having this conversation three, five, seven times a day, uh, trying to change the hearts and minds of people who generally do have the assets to self-fund. So I'm going to go through this, give you tips on how I handled and still handle the conversation. I'm going to show you how Benefit Buddy, in my mind, is the tool to take people through this conversation and how I generally use it in this conversation. Most of the time, it's instructing people on how to have this conversation nowadays, but it's a tool I definitely wish I had when I was having this conversation every day. I want this to be an open dialogue too. So share wherever you're struggling. Share your perspective. If you have a case that's just like this, feel free to run it by, put it in the chat. I want to be all ears and kind of help you guys specifically because the reason this topic happens and happens at least once a year is because people come asking about it. So I'll get started, but feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to throw anything in the chat that you'd like to kind of go over specific to this topic. So I feel like I set up the self-funding objection well enough that you understand what it is, where it comes from. Now I want to kind of give you an idea of how I handle it because I think a change in perspective for some of you, if you're struggling with this routinely, is really going to be the big shift in helping you turn more of these into long-term care cases, but also to help win over more financial advisors as referral partners. That's, I think, the biggest thing about this is if you do a really good job with a case like this and there's another financial advisor involved and you can help them see the value of long-term care even for those who could self-fund, you could win over a very high quality referral partner in the process. So I want you to understand that there's a lot in it for you beyond just winning a case you might not have otherwise won. Um, but in order to do that, you need to have a bit of a mental shift. I think oftentimes, and when I first started having this conversation regularly, this was my state of mind, that you had to win this argument that was present, right? Advisor or client and advisor believes they can self-fund. You believe that long-term care is the best solution, and you're going to be at odds and try to be the last one standing in the conversation where you win and they begrudgingly, pick up a long-term care plan and you've won. I don't think that is the long-term success approach. I think it can be a short-term success approach, but your probabilities of success are pretty low. So how I handle this is to not be adversarial, right? I will not argue with somebody if I don't have to, right? So that can be tough when somebody's coming in with an opposing viewpoint, right? But you have to really be realistic and you have to understand the situation at hand. If this client has $10 million in cash in the bank, they could likely self-fund an extended care event if it were to happen to them, right? So why would we waste any time trying to fight that? I start by agreeing. If your advisor said you could self-fund, if you're telling me you could self-fund and we're going through fact finding and I get an idea of your financials and it truly could be a self-funded sort of extended care event, I'm going to agree. Yeah, I believe you actually could self-fund your long-term care. And that's in my opinion, one of the most powerful things you can do because you are not discrediting anybody. You're not discrediting the client's beliefs. You're not discrediting the advisor's assumptions. You are validating them. If you start by validating somebody, you'll probably get them more to listen to the rest of what you have to say versus starting out as an opponent and you're on the clock at that point. You better really present something good because you've kind of poked the bear a little bit, right? So if if it's out there that you could self-fund, I agree. I am not here to tell you that you couldn't. I'm here to show you alternatives. I'm here to show you how using a highly leveraged long-term care plan can actually constitute a better deal for you in your asset protection. And I'd like to just take you through a couple of things that will show you at least the long-term care side so that you can understand and make the most informed decision, right? I'm here to provide solutions. I'm here to provide alternatives. I'm not here to shut down what your original plan is. Yeah, and the Phyllis article that I believe was just put in the chat is amazing. I'll get back to that in a bit. Um, One of the things I want to go over, though, I got a real bone to pick with the vernacular. Many people will say self-insure, and that's like nails on a chalkboard for me. I can self-insure my long-term care. You cannot self-insure yourself. The concept of insurance is transferring the risk to another entity, so it is self-funding and not self-insuring. Okay? As long as we're clear on that, I'll be happy. But I want to take that word out of the vernacular because it is technically an oxymoron. But um, as long as we set up that conversation as somebody who is looking out for your best interest, trying to show you a good deal, and not trying to be the opponent, the argument, this is why you need long-term care and nothing else is going to be as good of an approach, you will have that opportunity to show what you mean, right? That's your ticket into the door. So once you do that, I think it's important to understand the high net worth client, right? You understand their psychology. People don't get to a point of really high net worth without recognizing a good deal, right? I think one of the keys to building wealth is actually using your discretionary income that you have to spend or your savings into efficient vehicles that do the best possible job for your financial picture, right? So people who are high net worth, it's not like they're just you know, frivolously doing whatever they want with their money. They're still looking out for the best deal, oftentimes more so than your average client. So um, that's the most important thing is to set up. I'm going to show you why long-term care is a good deal compared to self-funding and also show you how they work together, right? That's another really important thing conversationally. I want to show you how long-term care and self-funding can work together. And I'll show you that a little bit more as we get into Benefit Buddy. But if you're incorporating their original approach into your suggested approach, again, that just further creates that collaborative environment and gets them on your team more, right? We catch more flies with honey than whatever the bad thing we catch flies with. I forgot the figure of speech. I'm normally the analogy guy. Um,
Hey, Jason.
yeah,
Hey, just to add to what you're saying too, I think high net worth clients also want concierge service. And I think when you buy long-term care insurance, it can allow you to get to the top of the line when it comes to, the providers, right? They're going to see insurance and that guaranteed funding as a great attribute of having you as a client. So I think there's a lot of intangible reasons that this can help set the stage for a better concierge type of experience. But you, as the agent advisor, needs to deliver on that promise and make sure that you're there throughout the life cycle of the process, including at point of claim, to help guide them. But I think
yeah,
that's an
100%.
important
And,
aspect to leverage is no matter how much you self-fund, you may not get a concierge experience, with all the other aspects to what needs to be solved in the ecosystem there.
yeah, it's a super great point, super helpful point, and that's another kind of thing about the lifestyle of the high net worth client. They have specialists for everything, right? Generally, they're looking to get the best care or be taken care of the best for every little angle of their financial picture and even other elements of their lifestyle. So, yeah, makes sense to have a long-term care professional as their finger on the pulse, consistently helping them out. Um, so if I think where most people really start to slip in this self-funding conversation is you've made your long-term care presentation and the client comes back and says, this is great, but I got to check with my advisor on this. I know for many that makes your skin crawl. I think beyond the Phyllis article that is put in the chat, 7 questions to ask your financial advisor, I would give them that as kind of a homework assignment. Make sure you're asking about these crucial elements to make sure that your advisor has done their due diligence from a long-term care perspective. But also, I go a step further. Bring them in. Why don't we have a conversation together so we can all get on the same page? Again, collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. We're not being adversarial. This could be a teaching moment for absolutely everybody, right? Including you. So invite that advisor to the conversation and get them to hear what you're saying. Because again, there's a potential to win them over as a referral partner as well if you do a good enough job here.
I want to ask a question that Angie had asked in the chat,
Okay.
which is how do you get the advisor into the conversation in the first place? Any suggestions there?
It's tough. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to win them all. I'm not pitching a 100% success rate, but I think if you're able to establish that rapport with the client up front and kind of understand that this is going to be a collaborative exercise, that is going to increase your chances of the client saying, hey, this guy had some really compelling things to say about long-term care. I think we should have a conversation together just to make sure, this is something that's good for my plan. There are going to be advisors who are not open to the conversation at all, right? Unfortunately, again, you're not going to win them all. But I think the best thing to do is just to get that rapport in a place with the client first and try to set something up like at the end of that initial call that you have with the client. That's your best bet. Otherwise, I think it's better than being that person who wants to keep the client over here in a corner and not have their advisor involved, right? I would play up the fact that, yeah, I'm sure you have the implicit trust of your advisor. They were part of what got you to this point financially, right? So I want to involve them. I want them to know about this piece of your financial plan because I'm interested in your advisor being that all-knowing person still.
Yeah, and Angie had asked, what's the right way to kind of establish that there is an advisor? And I think you can use a general approach, which is asking them, is there any reason why we can't do this plan together? Ask with an open-ended question, because they also might be working with another agent, right? And you run into a lot of those situations too. You want to have them commit to working with you from the very start. And if they verbally
Good point.
commit to it, They're much more likely to follow through. So I think, when you start with that approach, then the advisor kind of can come up organically, or you can ask specifically about it. But don't be shy about asking that question when you're first talking to that client.
Yep. Are there any other questions? I mean, Angie, it's a really, really realistic, common, and understandable fear because your case could just get torpedoed, right? I mean, there's no other way to say it. You can't win them all. So I think that's what you have to keep in mind. You can't win them all, but I'm going to take XYZ thing I've learned and give it my best effort and really try to get to that point where I have all three people sitting together and talking through this long-term care plan. Because once you're there, I think your chances go way up, right? If you can employ some of these, like, I'm not looking to derail the relationship, I'm looking to make the advisor look good as well by showing that there may be a better alternative or a complementary measure to add to the self-funding plan, right? And it helps the advisor help their clients, right? I worked with plenty of advisors who said, why should I even get into long-term care? You're building up all of these assets for your clients, and the worst thing that can generally happen to clients, even in a semi-bulletproof state, is to have a lot of those assets drained due to an extended care event, right? And it's not just speaking for empathy to their clients. It's also their assets under management, and in many cases, their legacy assets under management that will be part of that drain in an extended care event. So it's in their best interest to learn more about long-term care and offer it more.
Yeah, I think what you'll find too, Angie, is if you engage with the client in this way early on, you build that trust, your client is actually coming with you as a united front to get their advisor to the table.
Right.
You're not actually convincing the advisor, the client is actually on your side trying to make that happen.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't clear there, but that's like the prime objective is to have through that rapport the client be your main advocate to that financial advisor to sit down and go through that. Yeah, good point, Mark. Thank you. So I am going to talk a little bit through how I navigate this conversation once we're into it. Does anybody have any other questions kind of about the upfront, about the mindset? Anybody want to talk through challenges they've had before I switch around here?
Can I ask you a question, Jason?
Of course you can.
Yeah. Um, None of us cold call. So when you're talking to a well-to-do that can self-insure and they reach out to you, when you inquire as to what brought them to the conversation and you try to get beyond, well, I'm just gathering information, once you understand what prompted them to contact you to look into this, how do you leverage that for the conversation going forward?
Yeah, I mean that's another piece of the conversation too. Everybody's different. It's not like high net worth clients or cookie cutter, right? So there could be an impetus to come to you or come to a long-term care professional because they've had a personal experience before. And those high net worth clients may be easier to win over, right? Yeah, I may be well-to-do now, but my family wasn't always well-to-do in the past, and an extended care event really put an even further dent in our financial situation. So regardless, I'm not going down that road again, right? That could be the impetus. But also, you know, some people really are a little bit scorned by their advisor just kind of dismissing and saying, you can self-fund your long-term care. I don't think there's any reason for us to look at that. And then they go look at a long-term care specialist to say, let's evaluate my situation and make sure that's really the case, right? I mean, most advisors are going to shop around. They're going to make their best effort, right? But some don't. I've seen it before. It's not a generalization, but I have seen it in situations before, and people will go look. Jennifer, you went off mute. Did you have
Yeah, I was
something?
gonna say something. I learned from Steve Elliott. He uses the specialist versus PCP conversation when he talks to them. He's like, you go to your PCP and he refers you to the oral surgeon or the orthopedic surgeon. Orthopedic surgeon said, let's get a knee replacement. You don't go back to the primary care doctor. And if that primary care doctor said, no, you don't need that, so that was a good analogy and it's worked for me in the past. So I like that
Yeah,
route.
I think that helps a lot.
Mhm.
And yeah, that just kind of goes back to that psyche for well-to-do people. They want specialists for every single area of their finances and their lifestyle where they can. So yeah, super good point. Gene, I don't know if that answered your question. Um,
Well, there's no
let me
one
know.
steady answer, you know. When people are comfortable financially, they feel they can quote unquote insulate themselves from what impacts mere mortals. But, again, people are people and money is money. If they have any hesitation about spending $6,000 or $8,000 a year for insurance, which they can afford, imagine what it feels like to spend 80 or $100,000 a year for cost of care, which they can afford. It's a question of how they'd rather be wrong.
Right.
But for well-to-do people, they have a certain end.
Oh, I think we lost Gene, but that's a oh,
Jane, you
I
might want to type in the chat because your connection's a little bit spotty here.
yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from though. There can be a little hint of I don't want to arrogance sounds too harsh, but there is kind of if I can self-fund this anyway, I don't want to necessarily look at anything else, but I think it goes back to here's the good deal, right? That's sitting right in front of you. And talking about the actual dollars and cents leverage of an insurance plan compared to self-funding, which we'll get into a bit with Benefit Buddy, really helps. And I gotta always give a shout out to John Wheeler when I do this presentation, who gave me the just banger quote of, I don't know at what level of wealth we become comfortable intentionally overpaying for things. And a full self-fund can 9.9 times out of 10 represent an overpay for long-term care. So if you're helping avoid that overpay, you're doing a big service, to your client. Whether they use the long-term care or not, just understanding that they're prepared for the worst in that case is a big deal because I think at that level of wealth, you start to think about how can I efficiently preserve the position I'm at.
Yeah, or you could say, how would you like a $5,000 discount or coupon off of your self-funding plan?
100%. I
Right?
mean,
There's a
that's
lot of ways to position it where you're getting value there.
Hey, Jason, I had one more thought to throw out, or two more
Mhm.
thoughts. One is that initial conversation is our time to talk about our experience with claims, with anyone that we've been through a long-term care situation with, and to really showcase that we are living this morning, noon, and night. And the other image that I like to portray when talking with someone who does have a financial advisor is I say, you guys or you are in the middle of a circle, and standing around the circle are people, we're all holding hands. It's your CPA, it's your financial advisor whose job is to grow your money. It's me, a specialist whose job is to protect your money. It's your estate planning attorney. We all want the best for you. We're holding hands with you in the middle. And that's kind of the image that I want to start the conversation off with. But I think you know, making it clear that we do this day in and day out. We understand what's important in structuring a policy because we've lived through so many claim situations. That's a real opportunity for us to shine.
Yeah, it's a really good point that you make. And I think I don't I don't want to paint an unfavorable picture of financial advisors. Um, I'm here to speak to cases where you could have somebody who's relatively stubborn or disinterested in a conversation. I think most advisors actually want to have a guy or a gal for everything, right? I'm mostly focused on the wealth accumulation, your investments, your personal budget, whatever it may be there. But I need to have people in my circle to truly be that holistic financial advisor. I need to have a trusted CPA in my network to be able to consult with clients because I don't have time in my practice to become a CPA myself, right? Long-term care, again, is a full-time job in many respects. I like to have a long-term care specialist that I can count on to come in for my clients to help with that asset protection. Yeah, you'll find that many advisors are actually receptive to having that kind of trusted circle of professionals. But of course, we have to speak to the difficult cases and kind of how to overcome them as well. So thank you everybody for kind of volunteering, asking questions, giving your situations. I want to do a run through of Benefit Buddy because, man, if I were back in my old position, I would have wanted this so badly to use in my conversations. So for those of you unfamiliar, Benefit Buddy is kind of our cost value indexing tool for long-term care, but it's also got a couple of different financial modules on it that we can use to compare the cost of an insurance plan to the cost of, say, self-funding or the cost of long-term care as a whole in their area. So I do want to start by just setting up a pretty default case. With this drop down on the right-hand side, you can select self-funding and update the charts. And what Benefit Buddy is going to do here for us is it's going to take the premium that we're looking to pay for a long-term care plan, whether it be a recurring pay, 10 pay, single pay, whatever it may be, and take that and apply it to the self-funding module and say, what if we put this exact same premium into the market? It's the closest we can get to a comparison between insurance and investing. And you can actually set both the annual return and the tax on gains for whatever market account you plan to use. So I would get this all the time. Hey, Jay, I think I'm going to get 8% in the market. Like, I'm just that good, right? Why would I look at insurance if I'm going to have very favorable returns in the market, right? So if you're going through this with somebody and they say, hey, I think I'm going to do better than that in the market, actually, again, don't argue. Just show them whatever scenario you'd like to show them. So in that case that we have a person who says they're going to get 8% in the market, I'm not going to back down or say, are you sure? I'm just going to show them, right? So that they can get an idea. The important thing to look at here and the important thing to introduce the client to is the insurance multiplier and the funding multiplier here. So just brief explanation. The multiplier here states that for every dollar we put into this plan from now until our hypothetical claim age, so for this client, 35 years of premiums at 3,100 a year, it's going to come out to 109,000 put into this plan. And that is nothing to scoff at, right? That's a lot of money to put into the plan. But as illustrated, we're getting about 1.3 million of total long-term care benefits out there, meaning for every dollar, we're really getting almost $12 of long-term care leverage here. We're getting 11.9 times our premium in total available insurance benefit. On the funding side, you can see the numbers match up. We're putting the same amount into this market account that we're going to use for self-funding, but even at 8% year over year from age 50 to 85, we're looking at about 583,000, which means we're still doing pretty good. We're getting 5.3 times our money, but we're looking at far more leverage on the insurance side, especially when you consider you put your premium dollars, your first premium dollars into this plan, and you have a base benefit, right? You have a leveraged base benefit that's available immediately. So that's one of the things that insurance can do that self-funding in the market cannot do, that immediate leverage. Your long-term care benefit is relatively irrespective of timing, whether it be for an early claim or whether it be for what state the market's in at the time, right? Mark, do you have something to add?
I would say like illustrate that too. That's the beauty of the tool is how quickly you can show these things. So change the claim age to 60, right? This care can happen at any age. Let's look at age 60 and look at the numbers. And it's just going to show you that it's much clearer, right, that you're going to get far more leverage immediately, like you said, from the insurance than from self-funding. So run a few scenarios. Advisors like simulations, Monte Carlo scenarios, right, to look at it. But 85 is a good age at which a lot of people are going to use this benefit, but it doesn't mean that, they may not need it, 10 years from now, which is a big part of why the insurance is so important.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Um, so just talking about that timing piece, it's not just about an early claim, but it's talking about what state is the market in when you actually need that money, when long-term care comes knocking and you plan to use that money, right? So we got to talk about sequence of returns risk with the market. If the market's down and we want to take that money out for long-term care because we're on claim, we're having an extended care event, you're basically going against the cardinal rule of investing that somehow even 11-year-olds know nowadays, which is buy low, sell high, right? You as an advisor, if you have the advisor as part of the conversation, you wouldn't want to have to advise your client to sell their assets low, right? You want to be able to let that account recover and continue growing rather than pulling from those assets, right? So long-term care is sitting here, rather timing irrespective, ready after a 90-day elimination period when you're on claim, when you need it, right? And you can just draw from that tax-free, which is another aspect to this, right?
Mhm.
Um, sure, there are clients who are going to tell you that I'm going to do this in a Roth, or the advisor says, oh, good, we'll just do it in a Roth, right? You're still not going to hit the leverage that insurance can provide in many cases. But if you are in a taxable account, you can see we have the after-tax multiplier here, and you can get an idea, even at just 20% tax on gains, how much that erodes your overall multiplier and how much you could be taxed for. High net worth clients, beyond all of the other characteristics I've given, like to avoid taxable scenarios, right? So long-term care is a huge boon there, and that benefits are received tax-free, right? So,
Jason,
mhm,
Esther asked the question about the objection. What if I never use the insurance?
mhm,
I think that's a good way to illustrate too, if you switch the traditional to a hybrid,
yep,
what it looks like, with the death benefit if you don't use the long-term care. And again, same concept, right? Similar types of leverage, a little bit different in terms of the funding multiplier, right? Because of how it's being funded. This is a pay to 65
yep.
example. But
I could show a
again,
10
if you
pay
don't
here.
if you don't need care, you have on the left-hand side, you have the death benefit, and that's kind of how you can um, give that live, die, quit story on the hybrid side. So, and
Another
always
super
like,
good point. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I kept it very default just to kind of show you some numbers, but I will have this conversation with hybrid long-term care 9 times out of 10, unless there's another reason to look at a traditional long-term care plan. I think hybrid is generally the best fit for that high net worth crowd who likes the flexibility, who likes the ability to pull the ripcord if they need to, and have the assets for a single premium or 10 pay. So yeah, I think that's a really good point of it too. Folks who worry about this doesn't feel efficient to me if I don't ever need long-term care. You've got that hybrid option to be able to offer. Now, we've talked about timing, we've talked about taxation. Many of you have brought it up, and I'm very proud of you for bringing this up before I got into it. But you also have to think about the fact that the self-funding side does not get you access to any sort of long-term care professional who's going to help you through your claim, who is going to be connected to all sorts of different folks, the Amada Senior Cares, the T Cares of the world, that will help bring value to you and peace of mind to you as you're going through an extended care event. And just having that trusted professional and their long-term care network by your side is not to be discounted. It's much better to be with it than without it, especially if we're getting a good deal on the long-term care protection already, right? That the access to you as a long-term care specialist who's connected to all sorts of other long-term care professionals is not to be discounted. That doesn't come with the right side, right? And I want to make it clear, I'm going to get to this in a minute, but this is not a one or the other proposition that I'm making here. It's both. And that's how you want to set up the conversation, is that I'm not telling you to do all insurance and no self-funding. And I'm not here to say if you're not interested in insurance, you know, self-funding is the only way to go, right? So I think it's important, again, to be collaborative, tie it back in. You're making your points for your side. You're showing why insurance is a good deal. You're showing why it represents avoiding that overpay for an extended care event. Just continue to make it collaborative throughout and make the advisor and the client feel like they weren't wrong for saying they could self-fund. They could. There's just alternatives out there they might not be aware of.
Yeah. Jason, I would add too that the best consultative salespeople, that we work with, they're planning with the end in mind. They know where they want the client to go. So even if you don't know if the conversation is going to head in this direction, I would still run the numbers because look at how quick and easy it is to do that so that you know if this comes up, what the outcome is going to look like. I wouldn't just
Right.
wing it and, see if you can pivot to this. I would actually kind of think about what is this going to look like and bring this with your back pocket, even if you don't know if you're going to use it.
100%. Before I have any sort of meeting like this, I would be preparing this ahead of time and I would be saving this. So you can save these plans. You can call it client first last name, hybrid versus self fund funding. And this is, whatever note. This is my note. And you can save, it'll be saved in your plans and you can just keep going because I'll save this part, I'll save the self-funding part, but we also want to get into the cost of care, right? So where I just left off before I saved that plan was talking about this is not a one or the other proposition. As a matter of fact, 99% of people are doing some combination of self-funding their long-term care and insurance. They're taking advantage of the leverage on the insurance side, but they're also planning either through the market or through their organic savings, some piece of self-funding. So rather than self-funding the whole thing, let's fund some of this with an insurance company's checkbook, right? Through leveraged dollars. And then let's take a look at the cost of care for your area. So this is, I think, where you really round out the self-funding conversation, right? So whatever benefit amount you end up at will be transferred over here in the cost of care module. So you can show a custom cost of care amount if you want, but right now it's just set to show home health care. You can look at assisted living, nursing homes with a roommate or without. You can set a certain amount of hypothetical years of care, and you can set cost of care inflation, which we keep at 4%. Maybe you want to look at 5%. Maybe you want to look at maybe only 4 years of care, whatever it may be. This will adjust dynamically and kind of show you what the immediate cost of care will be at age 50 and what the future cost of care will be at age 85 on a monthly basis and on a total basis. So you can really dive into the numbers, but just planning out to age 85 in this specific case, you can see we're projected to have about 17,000 a month at age 85, and that's what we have as the monthly benefit over here. And the cost of care in your area based on a 5% inflation is projected to be about 29,500 a month, right? That leaves us a gap in our funding of about 12,500. Now you're going to see different scenarios where people are closer, you know, to filling the gap and whatever it may be. But it's to set up the question of how much of this cost of care would you like to fund with insurance and how much would you like to self-fund? And you've brought this collaboration to a whole new level. I see where you're coming from. Self-funding is going to be part of this. How much do you want it to be part of this? Right? That's a huge, you've come from not disagreeing, not arguing, all the way to, yeah, I'm going to incorporate what you came in with into this plan. That's a huge paradigm shift to kind of give to the conversation. And that's where this client will start to build their benefit, right? Maybe we want less long-term care. Maybe we want to self-fund more of this. They're still going to, in many cases, come away choosing some form of insurance if you've done a good job showing the leverage, if you've done a good enough job showing that it's timing irrespective, that we have, tax-free benefit here. You have access to long-term care professionals. They already understand what's good about it, but including their approach just makes them feel heard. I think that's one of the biggest things you can do in sales, you know? Even if you're doing a presumptive close, you can still kind of do that to say, I hear you, right? I hear the approach that you're looking for. Um, so I think it's huge. You can show the immediate cost of care and say, hey, we're actually doing better than the cost of care today through this plan. So even in a case of an early claim, you're going to be doing really, really well against the cost of care today. But even out into the future, uh, you know, we can plan to self-fund a certain portion of this. So it may be, wow, I'm actually not comfortable looking at a bill of 12,600 a month now that it's facing me, even though I can afford it, right? Staring down the barrel of 12,000 a month. There aren't many things I pay 12,000 a month for, right? So maybe I actually want to take advantage of more leverage and close that gap a little bit more. And when you flip it to total using this toggle here, that's essentially for a 4-year claim, we're looking at about a $216,000 total gap, bordering on 217,000. So just kind of getting the client to understand the numbers in play really, really helps. And again, it helps you with that presumptive close. How much do we want to fund with insurance, with leverage dollars? How much do we want to self-fund like we originally planned?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of schools of thought about the cost of care. I'm in the camp that says don't overanalyze it. I know that sounds strange coming from an actuary, but we're not going to be able to predict what's going to happen
Right.
35 years from now. We're not going to get the exact cost of care. Is it
Yep.
going to be 40 hours a week of home care or 80 hours a week of home care, right? We don't know what condition someone's going to have. The goal is to try to create a plan that gives you the best chance for good outcomes, right?
Yep.
That's the overall goal here. So the advisor may want to plug it into their financial planning software, but again, you want to kind of keep it high level, keep it where the LTC insurance is meaningful. And I love that conversation, Jason, you brought up, which is it's not about insuring or self-funding. Everyone is doing both. How much do you
Everyone.
want to insure and how much do you want to self-fund? The presumption is you're going to buy some insurance. And here's why that makes sense for you.
And the
That's
presumption is I'm
that's the
not going to
bottom.
argue with you, and you are going to end up self-funding after all, just not the entire bill in many cases. So I think that's really where the mindset meets the numbers, right? The numbers show that I shouldn't argue with you. So I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna show you what good deals are out there. I'm gonna show you how you can incorporate that and the plan that you kind of came to me with together. And here's how we make the absolute best of this scenario. And for the advisor, here's our plan to kind of keep those legacy AUMs in place. And here's your introduction to a long-term care specialist who can help you with more cases beyond this one, leave you with a client who's feeling happy, feeling like their eyes were open. But also, I'm not doing anything to take trust away from the advisor. right? Yeah, it's a perfectly logical scenario to be able to self-fund. I'm just here to show you guys where there's a good deal. Yeah, the advisor's eyes are open and they appear more tolerant and wanting to get to what's in the best interest of their client by showing up for that meeting. I guarantee you that goes very far with their client as well. Just from somebody who's done this with advisors for years, I think taking them on little field trips to talk to specialists in any sort of financial area really helps them with their client rapport. So you should find that most advisors want to be part of a conversation like this if they don't have anybody for it yet.
Jason, can you go ahead and share your screen because Sharon had a
Yeah.
question
Okay.
about short-term care and how that can be a part of the conversation. Because again, it's just about creating some level of insurance to help. If it's the first year of care, that's going to be still a big help. Actually, go out of this module real quick.
Okay.
We'll show a different segment. So you see on the right-hand side where it says there's case studies, and under the alternative LTCI, we have a couple of a short-term care and an annuity long-term care case study. So try the Aetna one just to kind of, and we have this module that says custom LTCI. So you can actually input any plan you want. As long as you have the illustration, you can actually put in the numbers from the illustration, and it's going to do the same analysis for you of the insurance versus self-funding. So Sharon, you can absolutely show short-term care in here or any insurance product you want to show just by typing in the numbers on the left-hand side where those inputs are.
And you can see it here. So as long as you have the premium, the illustrated premium, however many years of premium that will be. So for this specific case, this was for a 65-year-old paying premiums until they're on claim at age 85. So this is showing 20 years of premium, but you may have a 10 pay, you may have a single pay, you may have a pay to age 65 and you have a 50-year-old client, so you're showing 15 years of premium, whatever that may be. The pay mode, right? Annual versus monthly. And then if you have the monthly benefit at age 85 and the total at age 85, which may take some quick math, you can put any product, like Mark said, into Benefit Buddy's environment and compare it to self-funding and compare it to the cost of care. So uh, this was a big release for us when we first released it because we want to be able to show the value of insurance. We don't have interest in just showing specific carriers and not others. We want to show any insurance product we can against some of these modules. And if you have a hybrid plan, you can also show death benefit and cash value at age 85 as well. So it accommodates those as well.
Yeah, one other thing I want to mention, I think the biggest objection to people in our community, our Buddy INS community, is they're afraid to use this software because they want to be in control of the conversation. But what we find when you screen share this with clients and with advisors is you're empowering them to ask questions and to actually be building their own plan with your guidance. So it's really important to realize that yes, you're giving up a little control and that can be uncomfortable, but by empowering your clients, they're going to trust you more.
Yeah.
And you do want to
Our
practice a little bit so you know how to handle, some of those questions you might get. You might, be curious, try different switches and knobs and try different scenarios for yourself so you can see what it looks like. Again, it doesn't take very long to do, but I've had the best conversations by screen sharing this because I can tell that the person across the Zoom from me is understanding what we're talking about because they're asking all the right questions.
Right. It starts with introducing them to this metric right here. I'm telling you, if you do a good enough job explaining this metric, the insurance multiplier, and of course, all the things that kind of go into that insurance multiplier, you have then set the client up to understand big number go up, plan higher value. Big number go down, plan lower value. You don't need to know all that much more than this. And the rest of the answers you need to get, you can ask, right? They can ask you, hey, Jay, my mom went on claim at age 77. Can I look at age 77? Yes, well, of course we can. You can see big number go up when I change the claim age to 77. It keeps things really simple. I can totally understand looking at this on its face and saying a client's going to get massively confused, but it's all in how you explain it. And I've made a couple videos in our learning lab that kind of show you how to quickly and simply get a client on the same page as you so that you can, really help them get to that quick understanding and understand how the value pivots when you change certain scenarios.
Jason, I need you to share your screen again. Sorry to keep
Okay,
doing this to you.
I'll just leave it up.
Sharon had a question about when showing this to advisors, do they ask to access the software so they can play with it? And Diane made a good response that it's like, well, you can get a subscription. Sure, that would be great. But that's not our be all end all here. You can also share this. And
Yep.
that's what that share button in the top right is designed to do. You can share it with advisors, with clients. It creates this really short URL for you. Just copy that. You can paste it in an email, or Jason's going to show if you plug it in to just a URL browser, they will get the same thing that you have here. The only thing they can't change if they don't log in is the inputs will be fixed. It won't let you change the inputs. So if you were to open this in an incognito
Yeah.
window, it would show you because he's not signed in that way. That it looks exactly the same, except that you can't change the inputs. So like if he tries to change it, you'll see he can't. So that advisor can kind of take this away, or the client, and they can review it on their own. You can screenshot this as well, or do like a snippet tool where you just copy as a screenshot really quickly. You can paste that as a screenshot in your email. I use that all the time. It literally takes a few seconds to do, and that's a great way to share it when somebody asks you for a copy of it.
You can save it and send it along. I
I just
actually prefer
copy
the
and
link.
paste.
The functionality is very, very nice. You can put it into the body of an email. You can put it into um, the body of a Word doc if you're using the snipping tool. That's been really helpful to some people have used it for executive summaries for their clients. Um, it's this as somebody who has this conversation routinely, has had this conversation routinely. Where was this all my life? Was all I thought when it first kind of came to life, because there is nothing simpler than this comparison and then sprinkling your story and your reasoning on top, right? That is the key. I don't think you can definitely send this off to somebody and explain in an email and get them to some level of understanding. But I think this really requires sharing an experience with the client together so that you can actually modulate this for them based on their wants and their needs. I think that's huge. To be able to story tell along with this software is really the biggest value it's going to give you. I think that's it, but I'm going to keep sharing my screen because who knows when a wild request will come out.
Yeah, Jason, can you scroll down to where it shows like the monthly payment and everything down there?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can change it. So like we can't use it to where it's like exact, right? It has to be like it says round to the 300. I get a little confused on that. So like I did one for 5,000, I think it was, or something, and it just gave me that error. So
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 that's for traditional long-term care. With custom long-term care, you can actually show a 5,000.
oh, got it. Okay.
yeah, and I think
And obviously that's going to throw our uh,
yeah,
example out of whack
Jennifer is
here,
asking
but
about the monthly benefit being in increments of 300.
right,
Mhm.
that's for traditional long-term care because we're dealing with NGL, and that's
Oh, okay, I see.
just
You
a
have to select a daily benefit with some
daily.
carriers. So that's because when you convert a daily to a monthly benefit, it has to be in increments of 300. So that's more of a carrier specific thing. The hybrid we made that way just so you can do a side by side,
Mhm.
apples to apples. But
Yeah, it's something where you can create an illustration for, say, a Mutual of Omaha or a Thrivent beforehand and throw that into custom LTCI if you want a more accurate picture with that carrier's pricing, right? So,
yeah, once NGL updates, I know they're doing a product refresh. We learned at ILTCI. Then I think that will resolve the issue we have. I have a feeling they're looking to add the monthly benefit
yep,
for that new product.
magically. Magically, our tool will get that much better. That's the wonder of APIs, right? Lifetime benefit for One America, that's probably the only challenge, Mike, that custom LTCI has. Well, first of all, I think you'd kind of have an infinity multiplier.
No, yeah, it's not the lifetime benefit that's the challenge. You just take however many years you want to show the benefit. So if you say it's a 10-year benefit, you just, create a
True.
benefit pool of 10 years. The challenge with One America is the inflation, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of the designs, the inflation is not on the base, it's only on the extension writer.
Yeah.
So that's where it's a little tricky. Since you have to type in the benefit, you either have to get it from the illustration or do a little bit of math there to calculate it. But you can show anything in the custom, including One America.
You could also do it piecemeal and show, two separate kind of illustrations there where you're showing the acceleration of benefits performance with no inflation, and you're showing the death benefit and cash value on that piece. And then you create another showing the EOB with any sort of inflation on it. But One America is probably the only really tricky carrier I see with custom LTC right now. I think that's all I've got. Mark, you were my eyes in the chat. Was there anybody
I think we were
we
answering
missed?
everything as we went through. So thanks everyone for the great engagement today and the great suggestions and feedback for everybody else in the group. Um, if you want to get access to the buddy system software that Jason just showed, just go to our website and there's a login button at the top right, and there's also something that says Buddy System under Join Buddy INS, so you can kind of get an idea. It's a fairly low cost program. We just created that so that we can actually afford to build this because there's a lot of software development cost to it. But for folks that partner with us, we always give discounts or give it away for free if you're doing work with us. So don't feel like you're limited in getting your access to the software. If you're
And
a
there's
new
a
agent,
30-day free trial, remember.
30-day
So
free trial.
try it out and see if you like it first.
If you're a new agent and you're just getting your feet off the ground, we're happy to do scholarships. Just let us know what you need. We're not stingy about giving access to the software.
Yep. At the end of the day, I think this self-funding conversation, make no mistake, it's a difficult conversation to have. You are coming in on the back foot. I want you to remember that. There's no getting around that. But I think this conversation is made harder than it has to be very often and in many different places. So I think the one takeaway I want you to have is don't be adversarial, don't butt heads, start by agreeing, and then continue by incorporating. And I think that will alone increase your success rate. Don't make it harder by creating two new opponents, right? Start with collaboration, let the numbers speak for themselves, and then speak to all the intangibles from there and bring their plan into it. And I think you'll have a really good experience.
Mike had asked too, we do have a newer version. It's not the same UI. It's kind of like a quick quote. We call it the individual quick quote. That's going to be in the buddy system in the next couple of weeks, I believe. A few new features are going to be in the buddy system. The AI underwriting tool, the individual product buddy. So the product recommendation is going to be there. But we do have a version of the individual quick quote that you can potentially embed in your marketing. So we can embed that on other websites. So Mike, yeah, just send me an email about what you're looking to do with that. It's still kind of in a pilot stage, beta stage. But if you're looking to add something to some marketing you're doing, we're happy to take a look at it and work with you on that.
And maybe, just maybe, at some point out there in the future, even those calculators may be able to speak to a self-funding scenario someday. You'll just have to kind of stay tuned and find out, right? Thank you everybody for being here, for listening to me drone on, and most importantly for adding to the conversation. You all had so much to share with me, and I really appreciate that. You make these what they are. Everybody be well, and we will talk to you this time next week. Have a good one.
Thanks so much.
Right,